Namaskar. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the third day of the 3 days National Conference on the Life, Literature and Works of Gurudev Dr. R.D. Ranade, organized by the Academy of Comparative Philosophy and Religion, ACPR, that is Gurudev Ranade Mandir. I request Secretary of ACPR, Advocate M.B. Jirli sir, to please escort all the dignitaries on the dais.
Good morning and pleasant morning. I deem it a proud privilege, a coveted privilege, to accord a very warm and hearty welcome to our distinguished guests. In fact, we have a galaxy of eminent persons. I therefore it is thought that we are really graced with the presence of these persons. We have had a very fruitful session yesterday, and with the participation of these eminent persons, we will continue to have a good day today. My dear friends, one of the important guests, a member of parliament earlier, I deem it a proud privilege to accord a personal invitation or personal welcome to him. We have had distinguished parliamentarians in India, notably Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, Mr. Deen Dayal Upadhyay, and others. These persons have brought glory to the Indian polity. It is therefore proper that our first guest, a member of parliament, and in a short span of time earned a name for himself and to the nation. We want such young elements to be in the forefront of parliament so that parliament grace will be enhanced considerably. I welcome Mr. Honorable Member of Parliament to this galaxy of faith. I again also welcome the other two dignitaries, distinguished educationists. It is therefore proper that we have in our midst for this session distinguished persons. I accord a very warm welcome to them. One of the important dignitaries from Oxford University. My dear friends, I would like to share my thoughts. Gurudev Ranade and Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan were also associated with Oxford University. In fact, when these premises were inaugurated by the then President of India, he confided that we have in our midst a person very near to the God, and therefore I have decided to accept the invitation to declare the premises open. This was a tribute paid by the then President of India to Gurudev Ranade. I would also like to share some thoughts. Gurudev Ranade was invited by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru to be our first ambassador to the United States of USSR. he politely declined, saying, I am more attached to Adhyatma. And that is how Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan became our first ambassador to USSR. All of you know the galaxy of people who participated in the deliberations of Parliament, notably Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's tryst with destiny, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, known for his eloquence, we too have had other eminent speakers like Marxist Basu and many others, Deen Dayal Upadhyay, all of them were the privileged members of Indian Parliament which enhanced the stature of Indian Parliament. I wish many of our parliamentarians would do well to emulate Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, and many others. So far as the second dignitary, a lady who earned a very fair name at Oxford University, many of us clamored to be the students of Oxford University, and it is therefore but proper that she has joined us in the galaxy of eminent persons for today's function. I accord a personal welcome to the lady. I feel her contribution, her participation will further enhance the seminar which we have organized. The third lady, and equally important, serving the Bombay University. The Bombay University, the Madras University, the Calcutta universities are the leading universities of India. It is but proper that our guest of honor also is serving in the Bombay universities. So we want her participation will further enhance the present day proceedings here. I once again welcome all of them, and since all of us are very eager to hear them, I once again welcome them and thank them for responding to our invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I request Dr. Ashwini Zog, another trustee of ACPR, to felicitate Dr. Ashwini Mokashi. Ashwini Zog felicitating Dr. Ashwini Mokashi. Academic Coordinator of ACPR, Mrs. Aarti Apte, to felicitate Dr. Priya Vaidya. I request Suhas Joshi sir to please felicitate Professor Paneer Selvam, the president of this function. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Dignitaries on the dais, Mr. Podar, Professor Paneer Selvan, co-panelist Dr. Priya Vaidya, Dr. Ashwini Mokashi, other office bearers, Shri V.H. Deshpande, Srimati Aarti Apte, somebody whom I know for last at least 2-3 years, Shri Bhimsen Jerli, Shri Jakati, and others, members of the academic community, people in the thinking circle, ladies and gentlemen. ನನಗೆ ಕನ್ನಡ ಬರೋದಿಲ್ಲ, मला कानडी येत नाही आणि मराठी येतं, पण मराठीत बोलणं उचित होणार नाही. Therefore, I will speak majorly in English. But I am happy that the Academy of Comparative Philosophy has organized this kind of a conference, and they chose to invite me and thereby giving me an opportunity to reflect upon my understanding of Gurudev Ranade's worldview, his philosophy, and how even today it is extremely relevant. Remember, we are in the 140th birth year of Gurudev Ranade. So his work has been that old, if we have to get a sense of history. But as it happens, the work of philosophers like Gurudev Ranade, who show us the path, is never old, although it is ever aging. And therefore, to dwell into his worldview, his thinking, his ideas, is definitely trying to understand how it has a kind of an eternal relevance. I am not a student of philosophy. At the most, I can say I am a student of social science since I have done my research in political science. But there are many eminent academics belonging to the research and philosophy sphere, and therefore, in a way, a person like me speaking in front of Professor Vaidya, Professor Ashwini Mokashi is kind of an adventure. But since the organizers have already done that adventure, whatever happens, I believe should be ascribed to their courage. When I started understanding Gurudev Ranade and his philosophy, and while preparing for this particular presentation, which I consider as a proud privilege, I thought I should stick to basically three things. Number one is what is the essential message of Gurudev Ranade for the people of India, and not just for the people of India, but for the humanity. And thereby also review his contribution in the world of thoughts, concepts, and ideas. Secondly, how there is a similarity between what Gurudev has thought, Gurudev has wrote, and what many others, as we say, great men think alike. So, how striking is the similarity between his thinking, his philosophical approaches, and that of others. And lastly, I will also touch upon how, if we have to meet with the contemporary challenges, and not just contemporary challenges, but the challenges of the future as well, we can certainly draw inspiration and also seek some guidance through whatever has been said and written by Gurudev Ranade. As I delve into the world of philosophy, and especially the treatise by Gurudev Ranade, I could not help but feel that his contribution is unique in multiple ways. I mean, a person like Gurudev Ranade, coming from this part of Karnataka, although he had his education in Pune and other places as well, but he gathered such valuable insights into the philosophy of this land, I would say, that even a person like Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan thought it fit to consider him as something superior than even himself, which many people may not know. And therefore, the translation of Indic approach to philosophy, it's something which is uniquely special about Gurudev Ranade. In a way, he also tried to explain the millennia old Indian philosophy in modern medium. And I'm happy in a gathering of this kind, there are some students who are going to be the future leaders of this great country. Because as they say, the civilizational journey of countries like India is from the past through the present to the future. And I'm saying that confluence of generations over here, which is such a great thing. His presentation, or rather the theory which he established, which is known as rational mysticism, and as he has rightly pointed out, it is the confluence of four concepts: intellect, feelings, will, and lastly, intuition. And all these things are different, they are separate. They have their own connotations. And while presenting this, he also emphasized that I value both reason and experience. In our country, in Indian philosophical traditions, I'm sure professors of philosophy would endorse this, that we have always given importance to Anubhava Shiksha. In fact, it was here in Karnataka where Basaveshwara, who first experimented with democracy, created what is known as Anubhava Mandapam. And therefore, Anubhava, experience, which is unique from person to person, it may vary as well. And therefore, he gave equal emphasis, not just on the reason, logic, but also on experience, which is, in a way, very personalized, very individual. He said that intuition makes reason more perfect, while reason makes intuition more sound and flawless. Both the things are worthy of deeper thinking. I mean, today we talk about Shraddha, and when we talk about Shraddha, there is also some discussion about Andhashraddha. I don't know what exactly does that mean, because Shraddha itself has that element of a very personalized understanding. So what is my personalized understanding for a different person may not be that kind of a personalized understanding, but that doesn't give him or her a license to label it as Andhashraddha or superstition, as I understand. And therefore he tried to marry both the streams, critical reasoning and spiritual experience. What is another very unique thought contribution, in a way, coming from Gurudev Ranade, was his emphasis on making people realize that there is one God, there is one world, and there is one humanity. Especially in a situation like what we are experiencing today, where there are conflicts. And most of the conflicts, I believe, whether in up north between Ukraine and Russia, or there in the Middle East between Palestine and Israel, in a way, at certain level, they are about one-upmanship. Who is superior to the other? Who is superior? Who is inferior? And when we talk about one world, or rather one God, one world, one humanity, I believe the possibility of providing any room for these kinds of contrived conflicts is nipped in the bud. Because we tell that we are one humanity, and therefore there is no question as to who is superior and who is inferior. People have described that the mysticism which he advocated was not irrational, but in a way it was trans-rational. I came across this term for the first time. And I believe it has much more deeper meaning. It was trans-rational because, as it happens, our understanding, our knowledge gathering, and thereby knowledge creation is also a process. And therefore, we are always in a journey of finding where exactly is the truth. He also has beautifully mentioned that while reason refines faith, faith enriches reason. The compatibility, the complementarity in a way of reason and faith, something beautifully presented by Gurudev. To a certain extent, I believe that his rational mysticism could be described as an antidote to blind faith and nihilistic skepticism as well. And today we are finding both of them in abundance all around. So in a situation like this, I believe it is very relevant to understand Gurudev Ranade and his philosophy in the present, in the contemporary world. He also has dwelt at length on self-consciousness as ultimate reality. I think there cannot be any second opinion on this. Because in countries like our country, for example, what has always remained in short supply is its self-consciousness. Had it been abundance for centuries together, perhaps we could have prevented invaders coming over here. Our acute lack of self-consciousness created a climate, created an atmosphere, gave birth to a situation where any Tom, Dick and Harry could come over here as an invader, could loot us, could exercise, plunder, several other atrocities as well, and then try to establish their kingdom over here. In a way, this self-consciousness, to understand what Gurudev has put in different words also, is his firm belief, his shraddha on the fact that philosophy, the fact, or I would say the approach that philosophy must lead to God realization. I mean, self-realization in a way is parallel to realization of the ultimate truth, realization of the God. So these particular features of his philosophy, his thoughts, his writings, his approaches, I believe is eternally relevant, and it is essential that we keep on reminding ourselves and also to our brothers and sisters about the relevance, in a way, the eternal relevance of what Gurudev had taught us. And I find a great similarity between his thinking and the thinking of many other philosophers, great sages, great children of Bharat Mata. Because as they say, great men think alike. And therefore, it is not something which should surprise us. In fact, it underscores the fact that we in India think in a particular way. Many a times, it makes me understand that India has to remain India if we have to show the path to the entire global community. I would not call India as a Vishwa Guru. That may sound a little condescending. But at least as a Vishwa Mitra, I am not exaggerating when I am saying that the global community is looking forward to India to provide guidance. And that can happen only and only if we understand the contributions of great philosophers like Gurudev Ranade. And see the similarity. When Mahatma Buddha, Gautam Buddha, was almost on his deathbed, his disciples came. I mean, everybody must be knowing about this story, nothing new about it. But his disciples gathered around his bed and they prayed him and they asked him that after his demise, after his departure, who would guide them? They were wondering. And then Buddha said that I have written several things. Whatever philosophical approaches I have taken, everything is documented. That will help you. His disciples said, but sir, that may not be sufficient for all of us for generations together. And also, how can we ensure that it reaches every nook and corner of the world? So Buddha said, then just try and understand my life story, my biography. That will also help you to understand. That will also show you the light to tread on the path of human life. To that the disciples responded, but sir, it will be limited to only your disciples. There is a huge number of people beyond your disciples. How would they get this understanding of your life and your teachings? Because they were never your disciples. Finally, Buddha smiled and said, if that is so, the only message is Atta Deepa Bhava, Atma Deepo Bhava, ye be the light. That brings what Gurudev had also told us about self-realization, self-consciousness. And therefore, whether it is Buddha or other Indian thought givers for that matter, let's take the example of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, one of the greatest sons of Bharat Mata. Dr. Ambedkar is on record having said that I didn't draw the inspiration for the fundamentals of our constitution and the emphasis on liberty, equality and fraternity from the French Revolution. It was the Gautam Buddha and his teachings that inspired me to have that as cardinal principles of our constitutional values. But remember the chronology. He talks first of all of liberty. In a way, the liberty to think is also a part of that liberty. Liberty to think the way you want to think. But then liberty again is not a standalone value. Liberty is a part of the trio. It goes next, in the next phase, it is the equality. Which again somewhere takes us closer to Gurudev's teaching, where he talks about realization of God within. And finally, fraternity. That is the ultimate destination. Mere liberty is not enough. Liberty and equality make a good combination, but again, not sufficient. It has to be taken to the third level, wherein we need to understand the fundamental principle of remaining together, which is fraternity. Unless that bandhu bhava is there, and bandhutva, bandhu bhav, fraternity, is not just about rationality and intellectual approaches. It is about bhavana, it is about emotions. We are linked together with each other through our bhavana, through our emotions. It is the ethos that makes us come together, remain together, and work together. And therefore, fraternity is something very, very important, and therefore, it is the third. First, liberty, then equality, and then fraternity. In a way, it also underscores the other message of Gurudev, which is one God, one world, one humanity. And see how it is also similar to what Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay had told us. Dindayalji's integral humanism, Ekatma Manav Darshan, tells us about the Chaturveda Purushartha, which is about Vyashti, that is individual, personal, Samashti, which is society, Srushti, which is nature, and Parameshti, which is the spiritual goal. And there is a step-by-step approach. Take care of yourself first, Vyashti. Then the society, the people around you, Samashti. But never forget about the Srushti, the mother nature. And finally, Parameshti, the spiritual quotient which we want to nourish further. It aligns perfectly with Sharira, Mana, Buddhi, Atma. Our body, our mind, our intellect, and our soul. Again, a progressive unfoldment. You cannot jump to Atma immediately. You have to take care of yourself, your body as well. It may sound very material, but it is not. Because taking care of your persona, your body, is for the larger goals, objective of progressively unfolding ourselves and achieving our mental and psychological health as well through Mana, Buddhi, and finally Atma. And I believe this also, in a way, resonates with Gurudev's thinking about intellect, feelings, will, and intuition. Here also, intuition is at the end. You cannot start with intuition because intuition is so very personalized that anybody can claim that that is my intuition. No. Unless and until you have that intellectual ability first, the thinking, your brain, then your feeling, your emotions, your bhavana, then your will. This is very important, your Ichha Shakti. In English, generally it is translated as political will. Very critical because that determination, that drive, that catch the bull by the horns approach, that is will. And finally, intuition. And therefore, what Gurudev, sitting here in this part of our country, thought about, presented, spoke, gave lectures, I believe it's something very parallel to many great men, many great philosophers, all the sons and daughters of this great Bharata Mata. Now, how do we associate ourselves in the light of several challenges that we are facing as a society, and not just here, but world over? The global community, I believe, as I understand as a student of social sciences, is in the grip of 5 different crises. What are these crises? I believe the series of these crises, in a way it's a chain, and you can start from any crisis and it will lead you to other crises as well. But again, as a student, when I look at these crises, which I believe the entire global community is in the grip of, it starts with a very, very fundamental, omnipresent crisis of identity. Who am I? Why am I here? What is the objective of human life? All these things put together, it is the crisis of identity. And unless and until, as what Gurudev had taught us about the self-realization, self-consciousness, we cannot overcome this crisis of identity. And it's very, 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 very critical. Unless and until we overcome this challenge, meet this crisis, I believe we will not be able to lead a meaningful life. So, crisis of identity. Secondly, in a way, the crisis of identity or the confusion all around about who am I and what is my identity. And we normally dwell into our religious, regional, linguistic, and several such identities. While all identities are important, and you cannot crush these identities, you cannot negate these identities. What is important is how do we ensure that all these identities, smaller identities, eventually merge into a larger identity. Pujya Vinoba said, Jai Jagat. But on day one, it cannot be Jai Jagat. When a child starts his or her life, he gets a name, he gets a last name, then he gets an identity because of the community, because of the locality, because of the linguistic group, because of the city or village wherever he grows. Finally, nation again provides you that identity, and then global identity. Vishwachi माझे Ghar is perfectly all right, but not on day one. Shakespeare said, what is in name? But there is everything in name. My name is Vinay, and somebody, if mistypes it as Vijay, heavens are not going to fall. But I may not get my Aadhaar card, that is for sure. So there is everything in name. Let us not negate these smaller identities. Let us not undervalue these identities. Let us not say that it's a very narrow and skewed approach. If we continue to remain in that, yes, it is a narrow approach. But eventually we have to grow, which is what is progressive unfoldment. Final goal is Vishwachi माझे Ghar Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. One world, one humanity. After this crisis of identity, I believe we are also finding ourselves in the midst of a very, very deep, again omnipresent crisis of purpose. What are we doing? Why are we doing? What are we doing? Do we have clarity about that? Do we have honest answers about that? A person like me who also dabbles into the political sphere, if tomorrow a 20-something comes and straight away asks me, why are you in politics? And if I tell him for the cause of society, and if he asks me, oh really? Do I have a very honest answer to give? And not only for politicians, for social workers, for academics, for teachers, for authors. Everybody has to find that purpose. Purposelessness, I believe, is one of the severest challenge before all of us. And therefore, this crisis of purpose. Thirdly, again, emanating out of this crisis of purpose, as I understand, is the crisis of authenticity. Everything is appearing so very contrived, so very artificial, so very formal, so very temporary. There is a tentativeness all around. People say, उन्होंने कहा है वो आएंगे, मगर पता नहीं वो आएंगे या नहीं. What is this? There is a disbelief. We are not able to trust. Element of trust is going down. It's a fashion to ask each one and everyone when we come across, hey, how are you? If tomorrow somebody asks me, and if I tell him, sit here, I'll tell you how I am, does he or she have time? No. It's a formality. And this formality has so very deeply seeped into our blood that the beauty of informality is something which we are missing today. Contrived, artificial, not authentic, and therefore the crisis of authenticity. Fourthly, it is the crisis of ownership. In a way, it has become a fashion to call names to our parents, to our family, to our society, to our city, to our politicians, to our parliament, to our media. We are trying to blame each one and everyone. That is something very easy for us to do, a kind of escapism. But that is not going to take us anywhere, because we don't realize that we are a part of the situation in which we find ourselves today. How can we exclude ourselves and tell that all these other things are responsible for whatever is happening today, whether it is challenges like weeding out corruption or several social ills for that matter. And therefore, crisis of ownership. We have to take ownership. I had once mentioned it, perhaps here only in one of the conferences, that Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, who comes across as an ideal hero for all of us, and while describing him, Samartha Ramdas had used the terminology that Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was Upabhog Shunya Swami. Swami, which is that he takes ownership of everything. Today we have Swamitva Shunya Upabhoktas all around. What is required is Upabhoga Shunya Swami. And therefore, crisis of ownership. And lastly, the crisis of relationship. One may say that this is the mother of all crises, and I would tend to agree. And when I say relationship, there are many youngsters over here. It is not just about boyfriend-girlfriend relationship. Yes, that relationship is also facing challenges, but that apart. When I say relationship, the relationship between an individual and the society, the relationship between an individual and Mother Nature, the relationship between one country and the whole world, the relationship between our planet and the universe. Everything, I believe, requires to be further strengthened. And unless and until we take care of all these things, 5 challenges as I tried to explain you, things are not going to be ideal for all of us. They say that every generation should try and ensure that they pass on a better world to the next generation. I believe at least this generation, the generation in which I am, has utterly failed in this. And therefore, we need to at least dwell upon these crises. I believe our own philosophy, several aspects of which have been elaborately explained by Gurudev Ranade, provides answers to all these challenges. Our philosophy tells us how to overcome these crises. When it comes to identity, our Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti, again, one world, one humanity, one God, provides us the answer to the crisis of identity. If we appreciate the element of divinity which is there in every other individual, and not just in a living person, but also something which is not living as such, it's a material object. Even in that, our culture tells us that we need to worship, we need to say thanks, as what we do on Vijayadashmi Day. So there need not be any crisis of identity. In fact, the crisis of purpose also is very acute. But our philosophy, which tells us about Antyodaya, which is considering the most deprived as the most deserving when it comes to distribution of the fruits of development, provides answer to this crisis of purpose. Let that be our purpose. Can it not be? Crisis of authenticity. And here comes the eternal relevance of Gurudeva Ranade and his philosophy, where he emphasizes going extra mile on pratyaksha praman, as what they say. About ownership, again, self-consciousness advocated by Gurudev provides us the answer. And about relationship, as I said earlier, one God, one world, one humanity is the real answer. Friends, all these things perhaps make us realize that history and our culture have provided us in abundance like a treasure. It is our failure, firstly, to understand it, then to propagate it, preserve it, and then to add value to that as per the contemporary demands and hand it over to the next generation. And I'm not saying this simply because I'm addressing you, speaking in front of you. But globally, people have realized this. And they have, in multiple ways, elaborately explained this and emphasized that India has to remain India. Then only India will be relevant to the global community. We know about Mahatma Gandhi's teachings of ahimsa and tolerance. But I must hasten to add over here what Professor Karl Popper had in one of his treatises explained us about the eternal dilemma. Karl Popper had said that a society that extends unlimited tolerance to the intolerant will eventually be destroyed by them, thus destroying tolerance itself. So we need to be tolerant, no doubt, but can we endlessly and for ages together tolerate what is intolerant? Something food for our thought. People in the global world, especially in Europe, are talking about what they call as multiculturalism. And you know, the failure of multiculturalism, and I am not saying this, a very well-known critic of Islam, Ibn Waraq, has mentioned this, and I am quoting Ibn Waraq. He says, multiculturalism is based on some fundamental misconceptions. First, there is the erroneous and sentimental belief that all cultures deep down have the same values, or if these values are different, they are all equally worthy of respect. Multiculturalism, being the child of relativism, is incapable of criticizing cultures, of making cross-cultural judgments. The truth is that not all cultures have the same values, not all values are worthy of respect. Unquote. Let there be a realization of this fact. This doesn't mean that we have to confront each time and every time, certainly not. But we need to make others understand that there are limits to tolerance. I believe simply we saying ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti is not enough. Every other spiritual stream also have to realize that ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. If our tolerance is to be recognized globally, every other worldview, every other belief system also requires to understand the virtue, the value of tolerance, the relevance of tolerance. But unfortunately, as we understand, globally, unfortunately, there is a shallow understanding of this fact. And which is why people are coming to India, giving us sermons, drawing their own inferences, and writing papers in their universities. And it's all very, very distorted. It's pervert. In one of the California University conferences, and this I am telling a story of some 25 years before, the subject of the conference was bride burning and son preference traditions in India. Can you imagine? This is how people are being told about India. And why is this happening? I'm sure many of you must have understood, must have read what a very senior British original journalist, Mark Tully, had said about India in his one of the most famous books, extremely readable, the title of which is No Full Stops in India. And there is a message of Mark Tully to the fellow Europeans. And what is that message? I'll just share that message with you before I conclude my presentation. Mark Tully had said, "The characteristic genius of the Indian mind is not to shake the beliefs of the common man, but to lead them by stages to the understanding of the deeper philosophical meaning behind their beliefs. But the Western world and the Indian elite who emulate it ignore the genius of the Indian mind. They want to write a full stop in a land where there are no full stops." Thank you very much.
A special lecture now by Dr. Ashwini Mokashi, but before that, we are going to release her book Kabir on Philosophical Counseling, Poetry, Insight, and Practice. The book written by Dr. Ashwini Mokashi is being released now at the hands of the dignitaries. The book is titled Kabir on Philosophical Counseling, Poetry, Insight, and Practice. I request all the trustees to please come up on stage. Deshpande sir, Joshi sir, Zog madam. Quite an interesting topic for this book, written by Dr. Ashwini Mokashi. She is a faculty of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Oxford in UK.
Thank you, everybody, for being present today. Thank you to the dignitaries on stage and off stage. Thank you very much to the ACPR for inviting me here. Thank you to Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe for helping inaugurate the book launch. Thank you, Professor Vinay Selvam, Professor Priya Vaidya, Advocate Potdar, and Advocate Zirli. I'm very grateful, deeply grateful to ACPR for hosting this launch and for creating a space where philosophical and devotional traditions are taken seriously. I thank Dr. Sahasrabuddhe for graciously agreeing to release the book, and I'm very grateful to my mentors, colleagues, family members who supported the project from manuscript to print. I'm also grateful to Mr. Chinmay Dharwadkar for designing the book, for Mr. Amit Pide for printing the book, and basically, all my philosophical and academic colleagues for challenging me and for, encouraging me to write down things that I've been talking about for a while. So Sant Kabir has been an inspiration and a very big part. His teachings have been a very big part of my life, not just at a personal level, but also, teaching Kabir in the Hindi classes. So during the COVID years, when we were all sort of stuck in the house, my friend and musical teacher, Manoj Govindraj, and I started a program called Kabiriyat, where we would talk about the philosophy of Kabir, and we would talk about, sort of how it's relevant to the modern society. And then, we would also select a poem that would be composed by Manoj and put to music. So that program somehow became an inspiration for this book. And it also created a space for me to treat some of my counseling patients in a way where I use the teachings of Sant Kabir to resolve their issues. And some of our Indian traditions have been existing for centuries. And one of them is, sort of the saints guiding people Gautam Buddha was doing that, Sant Kabir was doing that. Before that, even Advaitic acharyas such as Shankaracharya were doing that. And long before that, Sri Krishna was doing that in the Bhagavad Gita. And my first book is actually based on the Gita. And until I came across, or I got very fascinated by the philosophy of Bhakti scenes, I was using the philosophy of the Gita with my counseling patients. But the time came when I felt that, especially during the COVID, a lot of my patients were coming to me for relationship issues. And I felt that it was too difficult for me to tell them, just practice detachment, just remove yourself from the crisis, stay away from any kind of ups and downs, and then use that to give yourself some space to create a sort of a good atmosphere with your friends, family, or whoever you're having trouble with. I felt that it was very insensitive to talk like that because these people were truly in trouble and they felt the lack of love and sensitivity in their life. And that's where Kabir came into sort of like, the role as a guide. So some of the case studies that are described in this book are actually based on how Kabir's teaching about love helps us, sort of get over the relationship crisis in our lives. Here, love is not used as a sentimentality, but it's used as knowledge to ethically and philosophically transform our thinking in a way that it becomes not just a path, a guide to lead a fulfilling life and to have fulfilling relationships. But it's also sort of philosophical understanding about why it is necessary for us to have the understanding and knowledge of love, which is more like epistemological understanding. So I hope the students will follow some of this philosophical lecture that I'm going to talk about, and I try to make it as simple as possible. But given that I come from the philosophical background, one of the things that is really highly prized in our field is how difficult can you make something and how can you put it in a way that becomes very ambiguous for interpretation. But having said that and having made my apologies, I want to move on to the talk Sant Kabir and Gurudev Ranade, Bhakti and the Ethics of Lived Philosophy. And based on this book, I can claim that I have had the experience of using Bhakti as a lived philosophy, treating Kabir not as a historical figure, but as a contemporary guiding principle. And based on that, the same is true about Gurudev Ranade as well. I have been in this sampradaya for a very long time, as my parents and grandparents have been in the sampradaya as well. And my grandfather was a very close friend of Gurudev Ranade. And as a result, I have seen this in practice. I have heard stories about how Gurudev Ranade used to guide his disciples, either through his presence or through his teaching. So my paper is partly based on that evidential understanding as well. So Kabir's poetry articulates a radical ethical vision that challenges ritualism, caste hierarchy, and religious exclusivism. His teachings ground spiritual insight in moral discernment and ethical action, presenting bhakti as a critical response. His interpretation emphasizes the universality of bhakti across sectarian and religious boundaries. And we see that in Gurudev Ranade's works as well. And both thinkers advocate nirgun bhakti, or devotion to the formless divine, as a path to liberation. This approach discourages ritual formalism and sectarian identity, instead cultivating ethical self-formation and spiritual universality. Now, I'm sure you noticed that in Gurudev Mandir in Belgaum or in Nimbar Ashram, there are no pictures of deities, there are no statues of deities, and it's mostly like either the samadhi in the ashram, or here there's a sort of, parallel samadhi as well. So Sagara Bhakti refers to seeing a deity or a god or a goddess in the mandir, as we see in the Pandharpur temple of Vithoba, or any other temple for that matter. Whereas Kabir and Gurudev Ranade both propounded Nirgun Bhakti, and Nirgun means formless, attributeless, that what they see is what Gurudev used to call as Spiriton, and Sant Kabir used to call it either as Ram or Rahim. But basically, he referred to the fact that the God is inside us and is the principle, it's not something out there. So Kabir's style of bhakti was Nirgun Bhakti, and his teachings promoted ethical ideals. He was also very candid and uncompromising. He attacked Pakhand, he attacked Zativad and sectarian conflict. His poetry presents spiritual realization, not as ritual accomplishment, but as ethical awakening grounded in truthfulness and moral clarity. Kabir's teachings promote ethical ideals that transcend divisions of caste, creed, and social class. His own liminal social identity enabled him to speak across Hindus and Muslim communities, making his bhakti both spiritually inclusive and socially transformative. Kabir's critique of ritualism does not reject religion itself, but challenges religious practices that obscure moral responsibility. The accessibility of Kabir's poetry played a significant role in shaping collective ethical consciousness. His brief and memorable couplets, which are known as dohas, functioned as moral guidelines that could be applied to everyday life, allowing bhakti to operate as a form of practical ethical reasoning. In this sense, Kabir's work represents an early articulation of bhakti as lived philosophy in which devotion becomes inseparable from moral accountability and social critique. Gurudev Ranade presents a modern reinterpretation of the bhakti tradition through philosophical reflection and disciplined spiritual practice. His teachings emphasize devotion as a structured path towards self realization and moral transformation. Unlike emotional or sectarian interpretations of devotion, Ranade conceptualizes bhakti as a universal spiritual discipline accessible across religious traditions. As we know for a fact that he once talked about, how he used to hear the mantras or nam from very many different religions, and he also had disciples from multiple different religions. Ranade's spiritual community emphasized disciplined meditation, scriptural study, and ethical self regulation. His devotion to his guru was understood not merely as personal reverence, but as a pedagogical model of humanity, ethical accountability, and uncontrolled sentimentality, emphasizing measured devotional practices integrated with ethical self-discipline. Both Sant Kabir and Gurudev Ranade operated within periods of social and political instability. Kabir's life coincided with religious conflict and socio-political fragmentation in medieval North India, while Ranade's lifetime intersected with colonial rule and the Indian independence movement. In both contexts, bhakti emerged as a stabilizing ethical force that addressed social fragmentation through spiritual universalism. Kabir's teachings challenged communal divisions by presenting devotion as a shared moral path beyond religious identity. Similarly, Ranade expanded the inclusivity of bhakti by explicitly opening its practice to followers of multiple religious traditions. And this way, both thinkers emphasized humility, moral discipline, and universal accessibility as foundational principles. The growth of devotional communities around both figures also demonstrated how bhakti functions as both personal discipline and collective ethical culture. Ranade's institutional legacy continues through devotional communities and spiritual practices maintained by his followers. Kabir's influence extended across religious traditions and geographical regions, and even today, I meet Kabir fans all over the world. So, the contemporary significance of bhakti and applied ethics often it offers significant insights for contemporary discussions of applied ethics and philosophy as a way of life. At least while I was in Princeton, I noticed that practical ethics was becoming a major force of thought, and practical ethics, in my book, is basically applied ethics, which has been continued in India for years of years. And yet now it's got a new name, a new form. And talking about that, we can still defend how bhakti functioned as practical ethics or applied ethics. The traditions emphasize the integration of moral reflection with everyday conduct, presenting ethical living as inseparable from spiritual development. Testimonies from devotional communities indicate that spiritual instruction often extended to practical guidance in personal, emotional, and professional challenges. Such traditions demonstrate how ethical frameworks can be transmitted through embodied practice rather than abstract philosophical disclosure. Understanding bhakti as lived philosophy therefore expands contemporary ethical discourse by offering models of moral cultivation grounded in community, discipline, and spiritual reflection. So, in conclusion, I would like to say that the comparative study of Kabir and Ranade demonstrates that bhakti, particularly in its nirgun form, functions as a sustained philosophical and ethical tradition rather than merely a devotional practice. Both thinkers articulate pathways through which spiritual realization, moral discipline, and social responsibility become mutually reinforcing. By framing bhakti as lived philosophy, this study highlights its continuous relevance to contemporary discussions of ethical life, demonstrating how classical spiritual traditions can contribute to modern philosophical discourse. And let me also say that on the basis of this thinking, we are also offering a conference on academic exploration of bhakti in Oxford in April. And the advertisement is on all forms of social media. So if you're interested in listening to the conference or to the speakers, you're most welcome to register for it and to be a part of that as well. So, having said that, I would once again like to thank all of you for being present here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you.
Namaskar to everyone, and thank you very much for a very generous introduction. I had stated that only 4 lines would have been enough. My gratitude to the Almighty Lord for such a wonderful divine arrangement. We all are together. Gratitude to the ACPR family for inviting me, dignitaries on the dais and off the dais, my dear sisters and brothers of India. Let me begin this lecture with one of my favorite stories. And like all the stories, this story begins with once upon a time. Once upon a time, in a village, there was a teacher who was invited to address a group of youth. And as he entered the hall, and as he stood, and as he was just about to begin, he asked a question. Do you know on which topic I'm going to speak today? and a very enthusiastic group of students said, "Yes, we know on which topic you're going to speak." So he smiled back and said, "If you already know on which topic I'm going to speak, why should I speak?" And he left the hall. There was a lot of discussion, and they wanted to listen to the speaker. And so, almost after 6 months, when he was again invited, there was a bigger group, and of course, there was the same question which the speaker asked, "Do you know on which topic I'm going to speak?" And you know, now the answer was, "No, we do not know on which topic you're going to speak." And he said, "If you do not know on which topic I'm going to speak, why should I speak?" And he left. Now, there was a lot of contemplation. And almost after a year, the speaker was requested, "Why don't you please come?" And now a bigger hall and the same curiosity. And as he looked at the audience, they had guessed the question. He again asked the question, "Do you know on which topic I'm going to speak?" And by now, there was a strategy which was planned. One side said yes, and one side said no. And he smiled and said, "Not a problem. Those who said no on which topic I'm going to speak, they don't know, may as well ask the yes. Why should I speak?" Now the curiosity, frustration, whatever we may say, had increased, and it was almost after 4 years when the organizers went to the speaker. He said, "This is the last time I'm coming." And now it was a big stadium. People were discussing and they were very curious to know the answer. And as he stood, he looked everywhere and he asked, "Do you know on which topic I'm going to speak today?" There was no yes, there was no no, there was no yes and no. The hall was as quiet as it is now. And after a pause of a few minutes, he said, "Yes, I'm going to speak on silence." And I was waiting for that silence to emerge from within. Because if your minds are full of thoughts, how are we going to discuss about silence? When we focus on Gurudev Ranade's thoughts, the rich spiritual legacy of India, this is an entire legacy of this silence. This is a legacy of looking within, understanding who we are. And in this process, the discussion which we are going to have, and for the last 2 days, this entirely is a reminder to all of us to look within, to be more focused, and to understand what this means to us. And so the topic which I'm going to discuss is somewhere connected to that silence, somewhere focusing on peace. And my title of my presentation is Relevance of Gurudev Ranade's Philosophy, Reconceptualizing Global Peace Education by Strengthening Social, Emotional, and Spiritual Learning. So, I have asked this question to myself when I was preparing this paper. Why this paper? And why this paper is because peace is essential within and in the world outside. However, as a researcher, as a human person, we all know that there is disharmony growing everywhere and there is lack of peace, which means that it is not easy to be at peace. Because if that was so easy, we wouldn't take such a long time to even realize that peace is important. And so, when we look at what does that mean, it means not just telling people we have to be at peace, from a philosophical angle, it means deeper awareness that what are those dimensions of peace, a pro-life attitude, and efforts to awaken the world within, to connect with the self and the world outside. So from philosophical angle, when I analyze that why is it taking us so long to even be at peace with ourselves? If we just ask ourselves just now, just this minute, we have so many thoughts and we are not, some of us are not at peace and we don't know how to get there. And so when we look at the role of philosophy in general and Indian philosophy in particular, it helps us to understand the essence of peace. When we look at Indian philosophy, my submission in this paper is that I am trying to view Indian philosophy as a strong foundation of peace education. It is very interesting to say that we are very happy that we have such an important legacy. But the question is, what next? And on one side in the world, we have so much of violence. And another side, we have so much of wisdom. But there is nothing this side we see the integration of preventing this. And that's why in this context, I see Professor Ranade's approach as a treatise on peace education. And so the objectives of this research paper, what I'm trying to focus is an ongoing process to establish the role of Indian philosophy in reconceptualizing global peace education. Second is analysis of the tenets of philosophy of R.D. Ranade in context to global peace education. Third, reconceptualizing global peace education by strengthening the components of social, emotional, and spiritual learning with special reference to Professor R.D. Ranade's approach. And D, development of global peace education module based on Gurudev Ranade's thoughts for global citizens. In short, my dear brothers and sisters, we have very less time and more work. Less time because we see that when we read about violence, to just give you the statistics, we see global peace missing. Global peace is at its lowest level since the inception of the index, peace index. Global peacefulness has deteriorated every year since 2014. There are currently 59 active state-based conflicts. We have conflicts every day, and it is not just the conflicts. The global economic impact of violence, it is equivalent, it has impacted our GDP. The military expenditure is going high. When we look at peace and health, when we look at the WHO analysis, healthcare attacks have increased, mental health crisis. 10% of people who experience traumatic events will have serious mental health problems, and another 10% will also have some problems with their abilities to function, and we will have a disease burden. Now somebody asked me, you're a philosopher, so this is not your area when we look at the empirical. And I said, no. When we look at philosophy and when we look at its dimension, we cannot talk about peace. We have to understand what the world is going through, and we as human persons are experiencing it every now and then. And so when I say that we have done enough philosophizing on peace for many years, to be at peace, the phase 2, we are all trying to spread peace in some way, somewhere we are trying, in our own way, in our families, whether there is peace, Are we peace ambassadors in our families, at workplace, in our community? Are we helping the other to understand the relevance of that? And in context to the nation, spreading peace, if it is at individual level, if it is at family level, if it is at community level, it will be at country level, and it will be at global level. And that's why I say we have less time and more work. Less time in the sense that what we understand, we have to immediately focus. And that's why we are in a blessed country called India, where we are very grateful to the saints, the philosophers who have already done so much, who have already given us this rich literature. And that's why when we say that global peace is missing, peace is impacting health, India has a very, very important role to play in preventing the dangers ahead. And that's why when I look at Indian philosophy, when we look at Indian philosophy, when we look at the spiritual framework of Indian philosophy, which focuses on the inner and outer development, focusing on the dynamics of the intangible realm, that is, how can we live a purposeful life, and how can we focus on who we are, what we can become, what are our bad habits, what are our negative thoughts, how there is hatred when we look at everyday life situations, whether when you're in a traffic, whether you are somewhere, you see hatred sometimes. How can we eliminate it? How can we become aware that we may also have certain dimensions which are not towards peace but away from peace? How can we become aware? And after becoming aware, how do we awaken the potentialities which are in us? And if we try to focus on this, when we look at Indian philosophy, it is holistic. It focuses on the physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual dimension. But now is the time to start working on it. When we look at philosophy of yoga, it is not just that I do asanas, but can I be 24/7 in yoga? In whatever way I can be, that also is a peace perspective. And that's why we have organizations like UNESCO and so many others who are focusing on peace education. But peace education has been a part of Indian approach since many centuries. We have not documented it. We have not said it is peace education, but we have been focusing on the dimension of peace. And so in this context, when we look at Gurudev Ranade's dimension from a global peace education aspect, focus first is on enriching awareness. So when Gurudev Ranade speaks about mysticism, as a researcher, when I'm reading about his dimension of mysticism, as I understand, what he wants to convey is mysticism is not a proprietary of few. Like when we look at Jnaneshwara's Amrutanubhava, that anybody can get those kinds of experiences anytime. And the focus is to become aware. So when we talk about silent enjoyment with God, it is not one fine day. It is anywhere, anytime we may have that kind of an experience. And that's why are we focusing on that when Gurudev Ranade speaks about intuition must back intelligence, will, and feeling. Like Sri Aurobindo says, that these are the inner instruments we have with us. When Vivekananda speaks about each soul is potentially divine, which means all of us, everybody sitting here across the age bar, we all have that potentiality to be better than yesterday. But are we aware about it? And that's why we are trying to focus on becoming more and more aware. Our systems of education have to integrate, and peace education should not be a separate dimension, but trying to integrate it with education so that in classrooms, when we have our students, and our teachers, this engagement with peace should be the most important dimension apart from the subject learning which takes place. And that's why when Gurudev Ranade speaks about mysticism, wisdom, and he's trying to focus on pausing, when Ramdas says, Das Bodha, which Gurudev quotes, one should spend one's entire life in strenuous work and yet again in steady contemplation in a moment. So, when we look at Gurudev Ranade's analysis of the saint tradition of Maharashtra or Karnataka, we have to decode what is that inner realm of peace education which he is trying to say. And he's also trying to say to become aware. Very interestingly, Gurudev Ranade says intellectual power and absolute clarity of thought is the first criterion of mystical experience. So, if we have intellectual confusion, it is not how many things I know that is important, but how well I know and how I am going to use, how can I develop that clarity, and how can I focus on the wisdom aspect of it. When he focuses on the emotional aspect, what we understand is the dimension of equanimity. No mystical experience is possible if we do not have finer emotions. So, the most important thing is that experience that connect with God. So, are we making our younger generations focused with more finer emotions? Are we creating situations, activities where these finer emotions or the connect with God can be gradually focused on? And moral aspect, which Gurudev Ranade says is the responsible dimension of living every day a more ethical and moral life, because morality has no Sundays. And that is why, are we going to perform actions in a sporadic way, in an impulsive way, or can we become more responsible in saying with responsibility, doing with responsibility, and committing with responsibility that has a connection to peace? Because when I don't fulfill what I say, I will not be at peace. And if in our small actions, if we are more contented, we are moving towards peace. Gurudev Ranade speaks about the intuitional aspect. When can intuition become a part of us in the process of awakening? When we are honest. And it is from one of his writings, I quote, if he appears to be true to himself, if his whole life is an embodiment of absolute right and truth, if he does not deviate an inch from the path of goodness and virtue, if his whole life is dedicated to the contemplation of God and the services of humanity, this universality, intellectualism, emotionalism, and the moral fervor, which we have hitherto talked of as but subservient to the greatest criterion, namely a first-hand, intimate, intuitive apprehension of God. And that is why, when we focus on the dimension of God realization, it means how much of that clarity, commitment, and conviction we have in this process of living a good life. The second part of my discussion is I have tried to focus on the module which I am going to focus on, the Global Peace Education module. The first part is the theoretical basis of social, emotional, spiritual learning. That is, as I've already said, that we have a very rich saint tradition. So, taking this as a very rich component for this training program, how finer emotions, how moral development, and how, for example, the value of name, which is the spiritual realm, can be focused, and how we can enrich future learners with the same tradition, taking them ahead to the process of God realization. I've also tried to focus on certain practical activities which can be conducted, where we are trying to focus on surrendering to God, involving the youth in social development projects, focusing on the aspect of relooking at life, and having more and more discussions and activity based programs whereby peace education does not just become theoretical but it becomes practical. And so I submit that there is a theoretical base for peace education when we look at Gurudev Ranade's approach. There is a practical viewpoint, that is activity based thing. Plus, I also add that there is a need for quantitative and qualitative research, that what is the impact of this on the target audience. That when they listen to thoughts by great thinkers like Gurudev Ranade, what is that change in the attitude? What is their approach towards peace? I think there is a need for it because there is a gap in what we think they understand and what they really understand. And there is also a constant need to review and reflect. Now, you may ask me a question, is there a one module? No. I have tried to conceptualize 5 modules. One module for individuals to become more aware, focusing on the Indian philosophical realm with a special reference to Gurudev Ranade's thoughts. One module for teachers to train them to become first aware so that they will be able to take it to the students. One module for homemakers because we also want strong families, because strong family is something very unique to India. Vasudeva Kutumbakam can become important when in our own families there is peace. And a module for community, whosoever is the immediate community member, how this can happen. And what I feel is when we have these programs which are running, a totality of this will be what peace education can be. When can this program fail? If I critique my own program, this can fail if one particular group thinks they only can do something. Like when we say only philosophers can discuss and we only know it. No, every person sitting here is a responsible philosopher. I may have got this academic background for some years, but every person who contemplates about life has a better insight of life, and each person who's sitting here can contribute to the peace education which I am trying to focus. And this cannot happen tomorrow, later, from today. How can we start manifesting what Gurudev Ranade has tried to focus in our own ways to make us aware? And how can I impact at least one person? If that process of impacting one person starts, I think we will not be too late. So let me conclude my presentation with a story again. There was a small child. He was near the sea. The waves were coming and the fishes were thrown out of the waves. And he was carrying those fishes and putting it again in the water. And there was a very elderly person who just looked at the child and laughed and said, "Why are you doing this? What difference will it make?" And the child looked at the person and said, "Grandfather, it will not make any difference to me, but it will at least make a difference to one fish who will be alive." And so let us keep that in mind. Thank you very much, and sorry if I've taken a long time. Thank you very much.
Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe ji, Dr. Ashwini ji, Dr. Priya, and respected Ashok sir, our good friend Professor Nirmala Chakravarti, who is the chairman of Indian Council of Philosophical Research. We are very happy that he could also be the part of this program. Friends, I should tell you that I have been very much benefited by the scholarly presentation of three eminent speakers. I'll just take a few minutes to show the significance of their talk and how they are connected to Gurudev Ranade's thoughts. When I heard Dr. Vinay ji, I was amazed. Of course, this is not the first time I am listening to his talk. Few years ago, in Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, he delivered the 26th memorial lecture of Dr. Radhakrishnan, wherein he made a very beautiful speech with regard to India and its soft power. And he also pointed out in his lecture that time that how Indian democracy is not political democracy, but a spiritual democracy. That is something really remarkable. I still have fresh memories about his wonderful talk. And later, I had the opportunity of listening to his wonderful lecture at Beijing, China, in the World Philosophy Congress. So this is the third time I am listening to his talk. And I should tell you, my friends, that Sir could clearly explain to us the relevance of Gurudev's philosophy. This is what is needed. How do we situate Gurudev in the contemporary philosophical discourse? For example, he has argued that how the philosophy of Gurudev could be connected to Lord Buddha as well as the integral humanism of our well-known philosopher and thinker, and who has influenced the contemporary philosophers. You know, that is Deen Dayal Upadhyaya. The methodology which Sir has adopted is something remarkable for the main reason that he was telling us that how the philosophical discourse must be based on Indian philosophical tradition, because we have got a very rich tradition, and any revisiting must based on this approach. And also he has pointed out that there is a place, and the later part of his lecture has got a lot of philosophical as well as spiritual and also political implications. And I must tell you that when he was making a reference to tolerance, it has got a lot of implication. By quoting Popper, he has very beautifully pointed out that how the concept of tolerance has its limitation. I don't want to explain that further because it has got a lot of ideas which we have to think and we have to elaborate it further for the sake of the humanity. And also, yes, this is something very remarkable. He has shown us the failure of multicultural philosophy. In fact, in the West, especially in Canada, the multicultural philosophy is something which they are celebrating. But it is a high time for us to consider the significance of one culture which has been predominating in Indian tradition, which has been giving a guiding spirit for the entire nation, not only the entire nation, but for the globe. And also one principle which we have missed during these 3 days is the concept of one family. Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, he has insisted in a very beautiful way. And also he has shown us the methodology by which we can understand the significance of one God. This is something very important because Ranade, Professor Ranade has been concentrating on God realization and the spiritualistic philosophy, and he also gives certain guidance or methodology for understanding the significance of God realization. And it's a very thought-provoking lecture, Vinayji. And also, he has shown us how the Indic approach is something which can guide the entire globe, because it is Indian philosophy or Indian philosophical tradition which can give a guidance to the entire universe. In fact, he has shown in his lecture that how the philosophers of India, ancient philosophers of India, has attempted in a unique way. It is not the usual philosophical discourse which we find in Western tradition. We could very successfully come across great thinkers like in the ancient period, the Upanishadic period, for example, where we could come across the great thinkers, and how Indian philosophy was developed in the Bhakti period and third Renaissance period. So these are, I would call, the primal spirituality of Indian philosophical tradition. That has been emphasized in a very beautiful way. And also, I should say that Dr. Vinay's methodology is something very unique in the sense that he could tell us how mysticism is trans-relational. It transcends everything. That is the uniqueness of mysticism, which Gurudev has been pointing out. And also, the rational mysticism, he has given how rational mysticism is not a contradiction in term. Because quite often, the Westerners ask this question. When I was talking about rational mysticism with one of my Canadian friend, he was asking, how could mysticism be rational? These two cannot go together. But if you read, if you could read the rational mysticism of our Ranade ji, then one can understand the significance of the mystical, the rational mysticism. So we are very much benefited by your lecture, sir. And also, there is the crisis. This is the last point which I would like to concentrate on, is talk about the crisis, different crises which you are facing. And he talked about, first of all, the crisis of identity. Then he talked about purpose, crisis of purpose. Then crisis of authenticity, and the crisis of ownership, and also crisis of relationship. And as he rightly said, that the last one, namely the crisis of relationship, is something very important, because it is that which connect not only the individuals, but the mother nature. This is something very, very important. And in fact, if you look at Indian philosophical tradition, it is a holistic approach towards everything, because we have a close affinity with nature. In fact, in the Western tradition, we talk about deep ecology, only in the 20th century. But if you look at Indian tradition, from the Vedic time onwards, one can show how it is holistic in nature, and we have been practicing the deep ecology. So, sir, we are very much grateful to you, sir, for your wonderful lecture. And coming to Dr. Ashwini ji, madam, it was a very, very, very thought-provoking, and we are very grateful for you to release this interesting book. I was glancing some pages. You have shown how philosophical counseling, because this is a very important topic, which is adopted in many universities and colleges, which is followed, which is included in the curriculum. Madam, the methodology which you have adapted here is something very interesting. For them, in fact, in your talk also you made a reference to Kabir as a philosophical counselor, and also you made a reference to Buddha, and also Lord Krishna. I will just share my experience with regard to philosophical science, counseling some 15 years ago. I made a paper presentation in Chungang University in South Korea, wherein I talked about how Lord Krishna is the first philosophical counselor. And also I shown the Advaitic methodology, wherein the distinction between the self and not self is made in order to understand not only one's own self, but also the other. And the Westerners were so much fascinated by the methodology of Indian philosophical tradition and how we adopt this philosophical counseling. And also in your presentation, you could successfully show how the two methodologies which are available, Kabir as well as Gurudev, has got some common thread. What is the common thread? One you said is bhakti, and the other is applied ethics. The applied ethics, the theorizing ethics, perhaps is a Western concept, because in Indian tradition, from the beginning, from Vedic time onwards, we have been doing this applied ethics. So, thank you very much for elaborating that in a beautiful way. And Madam Priya, my very good friend, she has developed a new concept. This, I would say, this is something very practical, because now all the time we have been theorizing. We have been writing books and books after articles published. For example, Immanuel Kant wrote a well-known article, Perpetual Peace and all. But we are not practicing peace. It is not, peace will not come in a piecemeal way. So it is a holistic approach. This is what you have pointed out. So this methodology which you have adopted, that peace education should be introduced in all schools and colleges. And that methodology, you have given a very beautiful methodology. For want of time, I'm not elaborating. And 5 models which I suggested is really remarkable. And we are very grateful to you for giving a new methodology for understanding Gurudev. So I must tell you, my friends, that this is one of the fascinating sessions, and personally I've been very much benefited by the 3 lectures delivered by honorable scholars. And I also thank the organizers for giving me this nice opportunity of sharing some of my views on their talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for encapsulating the entire morning session in such a brief time. I now call upon Mrs. Aarti Apte, the academic coordinator of ACPR, to propose the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Swati. I'm here to present the vote of thanks. First of all, I thank Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe for agreeing to come here and presenting a wonderful lecture. It was really beautiful, sir, to listen to you. Next, I thank Dr. Ashwini Mokashi. She has written this beautiful book, which will be available here. Whoever wants to buy it, you can buy. It will be available at ACPR. And yeah, it's a book published by ACPR, written by Dr. Ashwini Mokashi. So naturally, it will be available with us. Next, I also thank Dr. Priya Vaidya, because her lecture also was really good for students, especially because we have a big student community here as part of the audience today. So it's a very useful thing, and we are also thinking of calling Priya ma'am again for the benefit of students. Yeah, and thank you, Dr. Paneer Selvam. He has been a great support throughout the organizing of this conference. Especially, I have been troubling him often, asking him small doubts and getting them cleared from him. And I also thank Ashok Potdar sir for having given the welcome address. So I thank all of you again, and especially the delegates who have come from all over India. They are all present here, and the student community. I hope you have all benefited from the 3 days of the conference, and I thank you again. We are going to meet again in the afternoon. There's a small announcement. I request Jirli sir to make it.
We are coming to end with this session, actually, the conference for the last 3 days. And I take exception to Aarti ji. We are not expressing any thanks to you people at right now. It would be at 4:30, right? The concluding valedictory session will begin exactly by 2:30. And at 2:30, we are going to present Pandit Manoj Govindraj. He is MFA Hindustani Classical Vocal Music, Mumbai University. And all I request to be present by 2:30 p.m. here after taking prasadam lunch at Gurudev Ranade Mandir. And we are really thankful to Vinay ji and all the academicians. In fact, I want to add few sentences here because Vinay ji, I wanted to brief him a little bit. And this is not a pure academic national conference, sir. It is confluence of pure academicians, religious leaders, and also spiritual leaders, sir. And it was very on a lighter side also and very serious side also. We tried our level best and our team has done wonderful job. And Vinay ji, we are going to release the complete works of Gurudev Ranade shortly. As I personally reported to you that Gurudev, during his lifetime, he has written around 28 books, and they were published by different universities, different institutions, at different time on different occasions. And the copyright problem was also there, and we could able to come over that particular thing, and all the books are ready for release. And I once again thank the Union Culture Ministry for helping for bringing out the complete works of Gurudev Dr. R.D. Ranade. And even I told you that we are waiting for the confirmation of the date of Union Culture Minister for releasing these books, sir. And I request you also to put a word to him for confirming the date. And it is a wonderful national conference. And especially we thought and resolved that we should involve and include very seriously the B.Ed students, the students of education, the students of literature, Marathi, Kannada, and Hindi and English, because they are going to be benefited more. And as all know, the spiritual relics of Gurudev Dr. R.D. Ranade have been preserved in the Academy of Comparative Philosophy and Religion. Please join with us for lunch. And exactly by 2:30, the parallel sessions also we have today also, sir. We have completed parallel sessions also. And we are coming to end all the sessions. Only valedictory session would be there. In that our All India, Indian Council of Philosophical Research Chairman, sir, is going to be preside over. And justice, even we have included judges also, right? A big applause to this understanding. The Justice Srishananda, sir, who is very famous, sir, in Karnataka right now. Famous means with his valuable suggestions and even delivering wonderful judgments, having great impact on the mind of social environment, in social environment, religious environment, and also spiritual environment. Hence, we resolved, and he is also part of our institution, sir, and he is going to deliver a valedictory lecture today, sir. And I once again thanks all the dignitaries on the dais and off the dais. Thank you very much. Jai Shri Gurudev.